Yum. So delicious. Could be nutritious, but probably not the most nutritious thing. But I love my coffee. Back on my coffee. Absolutely happy. Yeah, yeah, yeah. There's my morning song for you. Okay, so let's get started. So sort of wanted to talk about the resurfacing of life's lessons. I guess that's the best way to put it. So oftentimes we will go through a life, right? And things will arise and people will come into our lives and certain characters or certain energies start to surface in our life. And they're there for a purpose, right? So really it's asking ourselves, why is this energy showing up in my life? What is the lesson? What is the purpose? Why does it continue to show up? And sometimes there are energies that show up that support us into our next level of capacity. And I would say the next level of spiritual capacity, the next level of emotional capacity, the next level of mental capacity. And it could be each one of these, right? Emotional, physical, mental, spiritual, whatever it is. And it helps us to transcend or to kind of move forward, right? In this. Good morning, Jennifer. And then we start going through life, and then there are lessons that show up. And sometimes, as we were talking, or as I was speaking about these past few weeks about the dark emotions and some of the dark emotions that we go through, right? Good morning, Adriana. How are you? As we move through these dark emotions, right, we begin to ask ourselves, how do we overcome them? How do we live with them? How do we surrender to them? How do we allow ourselves to move through the process of this thing that might be showing up that's causing or igniting the dark emotions that are sort of flaming up within me? So we see it on the outside world. We see that the internal sort of gets pushed into the external, and we sort of see a movie. It's almost like a movie. If we saw our mind as what we're thinking and our eyes as seeing the projection of what is happening in our head, we can say that we're playing out a movie. But sometimes we're like, well, it's not everything that we want it to be. But it's not going to be, right? It's kind of like in your dream world when you want it to go this way and you're trying to lucid dream, but you don't really know how, right? Good morning, Patrick. And so what I'm saying is that sometimes the projection comes back as feedback to us, right? But the feedback sometimes is uncomfortable. The feedback comes back and we're like, what did I do? And then we're looking at our life and saying, okay, these circumstances and conditions, do they serve me? Right? The information that I'm seeing, the world that I'm seeing, the way that I'm viewing the world around me, is it what I want to see? What feedback am I getting from this? And then oftentimes we come into conflict, right? And the confliction that we have is that whatever we're seeing on the external doesn't rectify the internal, doesn't allow us to see the internal. It doesn't help us with the internal the way that we want to be able to see it. It sort of is like, well, this doesn't match up with what I want to see. And there's a conflict there. And when the conflict arises, right, then we're sort of uncomfortable. And we're like, this is not what I want to see. It's not what I envisioned in my head. There's something, the feedback that's coming back is not totally rectified with what I visualized in my head or what I had in my head. And so there's this sort of distortion. Now, a good example is perhaps relationships, which is an easier topic to dive into this, right? Where we maybe get into a relationship and it's not exactly, and it never will be, the way that we want it to show up. Okay, the relationship, right? You got to work for it. It's not easy, whatnot. But sometimes we end up in these sort of toxic kind of relationships and we don't even realize it, right? It's almost like we get so used to the toxicity of the relationship, the pollution of the relationship, that it becomes the new normal. And we don't even know how to get outside of that toxic environment because for us, that's normal. And then maybe we get an eye opener of what it's like to be in something that's healthy or that's not toxic, right? And it's like, well, did you learn your lesson? You know, you'll get out of this environment and you'll be in this environment that's actually serving you, and then all of a sudden, what, you're now back at ground zero where you're starting from the beginning. And it's like, did you get the lesson? Or are you going to go backwards? In other words, you're either going forward or you're going forward and then you're going to go backward. So why would you take 20 steps forward and then go 100 steps backwards? It doesn't make sense. But we do that because we're human, right? And a lot of it is just that hope that things are going to be different, that the environment's going to be different, that perhaps if I go outside this environment, it won't be as toxic. Well, guess what? If you are the one that is opening up the gate for the toxicity to exist, you're going to invite that energy right back into your life. It's not going to change. Good morning, Catherine. Or is it Catherine? Kathy. Sorry, Kathy. And good morning, OJ28. Good morning, CS, if you're still here. CSC. Czivard. I don't know. Some of these. And so we end up in this toxic environment, right? And then we get out of it. And then sometimes we allow ourselves to open up again the gates for the toxicity to exist. And this morning, because I was kind of thinking about it, I was thinking about, relationships and why do people go back to relationships that they know are toxic and think it's going to be different. And that's just been weighing heavy in my heart and my mind, and trying to understand, how someone could do that. Or is it they don't value themselves? Is it that they don't see it? Well, there's that movie. We used to watch it when we were a kid, and it was like Sleeping with the Enemy, where you're just in this toxic environment and either you're afraid to get out of it, or that's all you know. And so you don't think there's anything better for you. And then so you allow that energy to come right back. It has to be so bad, right? And it's sort of like looking at your life. And I know that I think it's in the Voice of Knowledge by Don Miguel Ruiz, which that book is really good if you haven't read it. But it sort of talks about relationships. And I believe that's the book that that he states this, that you allow someone to treat you a little bit worse than you treat yourself a little bit worse than you allow others to treat you. So when you look at an individual and how they're being treated, they literally are probably allowing themselves to be treated worse than they would treat themselves. No, sorry, I always get this backwards. They treat themselves a little bit worse than they allow somebody to treat them. So if somebody's treating them very bad and people are recognizing it, that means that they themselves are treating themselves worse internally. So it's an internal job to recognize what our boundaries are, what we're tolerating, and are we the ones who are opening up the space for the toxicity are we inviting it in, basically? We could be the ones who are inviting in that energy and not even realize it. And so then you get to ask yourself, am I the one who's inviting this energy? Am I inviting the energy in? If you're the one who's inviting the energy in, then it's like, I've got to be real with myself. What's happening as I invite that energy in? What is the toxicity that I'm letting into my life? But being honest with yourself, there's no right, wrong, good, or bad about it, right? It's just the opportunity to view your life and say, wow, maybe I'm the reason why this toxicity exists in my life. Good morning, Phil. I'm the one who is the invitation and the opening for this energy to actually come in. Because if we can recognize that and we can say, oh, well, these toxic relationships that we're in, we want to point the fingers and say, oh, it's their fault. But it's easy to say that, and there's nothing right, wrong, good, or bad, right? It's just the forward movement. We cannot move forward in our lives until we're able to accept that perhaps we are the vessel that is opening up the space and inviting the energy into our life. That we can maybe open up the space and say, oh, I'm the one who's saying it's okay to be treated this way. I'm the one who's saying it's okay to rehash the past. I'm the one who's saying it's okay to, believe in fairy tales that things are going to shift and change. They don't shift and change. What ends up happening, right, when you're the invitation of that energy, is that the energy will come back in, and it's almost like a lesson. It's like, the way I feel it is like, well, have you learned your lesson? Oh, no, you haven't? Okay. There's a difference and a distinction, but setting boundaries and holding firm in your boundaries will tell you exactly where a person's at. When you can't tolerate it any longer and you put your foot down and you set a boundary and you hold steadfast to that boundary and not give up, if the energy in your life cannot handle that boundary, it automatically will what? Release itself from you. Because now you're setting up boundaries. Good morning, Rana. Good morning, Rick. Cheers to you. Cheers to you guys. Good morning, Laura. So the ability to understand that, the ability to understand, oh yeah, I get to set this boundary and perhaps I didn't before. And perhaps there's fear there, right? Now it's up to you. Again, no right, wrong, good, or bad. It's entirely up to you. It's your life, right? I like to say that because there is no judgment or this place is as neutral as I can possibly get. I'm human, so of course I'm going to have in my language or in my thoughts, I'm human, so I might sway one way or the other. But that's why I always say, do it or don't do it. Up to you. No right, wrong, good, or bad. Just another platform, another opportunity, another perhaps way to look at it and say, wow, I'm the one who's allowing this energy to exist here. I'm the one who's not setting the boundaries and saying this is not okay. I'm the one who's inviting that energy back into my life over and over and over again. Why? For what purpose? Why would you continue to put that energy, toxic energy, into your space? Now, that's the bigger question, and sometimes that's a little bit hard, right? We don't want to dive in and kind of look at that perhaps we're the open invitation for the individuals that are actually treating us crappy. And we're afraid to admit it. And we're afraid to say something about it. Why? Because, oh, maybe people will look at us badly, or they'll think this about me, or who knows. Hey, Daniel from Brazil. How are you? Cheers to you. Maybe I should go to Brazil. Everything over here in our place is closed still. I mean, it's crazy. I can't even. Hi, fan. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. I'm a fan of you. I love my people. The individuals that listen. And, really it's for you guys. It's for me too. I do this because it helps me to process my thoughts. It helps me to sort of understand the subconscious of my mind as well. And then in hopes that it helps you, because how do I give back? This is how I give back. So you guys really are, to me, a family. People who listen are family, even if I don't know them. But spiritual family is a connection. It's almost like when we were talking about the quantum physics. It's an entanglement that we are all interconnected to one another. So I just love you guys very much. Everybody who's on here, the ones who are able to stay on and listen, not listen, the ones who listen in to 2 minutes and then say, okay, I'm done with Natalie. That's a lot. Whatever it is. I do appreciate each and every one of you guys. more than you can understand. Does me a world of good as well. It's a mutual thing. So, but again, the toxicity. So, opening up the space, allowing that in, asking yourself, why am I doing this? Why am I allowing this to happen? It's just being very real and authentic with yourself at every level. How do you be authentic with you? How do you be 100% true and committed to yourself and understanding, like, what is it that I'm up to, and really being honest with yourself? And you can do that in private as well, and it's okay. I mean, sometimes we want to confess and profess what's going on in our life to individuals, right? Secrets. Sometimes we hold secrets inside, and sometimes we have our own personal secrets that we want to keep in and that are private to God. And then there's sometimes that we share these secrets, but there's these internal things inside of us that maybe we're ashamed of, and we don't ever want to tell anybody. You could take that to God. You could take that to Creator. You could take that to, that higher, that energy, right, that exists there for us. You could take it there. You could also take it to paper and burn it up. So, it's really up to you. But the internal world, there are things that are hard for us to accept, or maybe there's secrets inside of us that we've kept, right, that we don't really want to say. But sometimes we have to have the courage to be like, I'm going to let this secret out, because why? For your own personal well-being. But then there's stuff that we keep internally that's okay to keep internally. Give it up, right, to God. Be able to have that communication. But really, sometimes we're just afraid to be able to articulate or communicate the fact that, well, maybe we messed up this time, or maybe we thought it was going to be this and it ended up being something else, and so we just stay quiet because we're embarrassed. We're embarrassed of what people might think. We're embarrassed, right? And there's, again, nothing right, wrong, good, or bad with that. I'm not saying you shouldn't be embarrassed. I'm saying allow yourself to work through that. However, whatever serves you, because then you're like, shit, I just let this toxic person, and you see it over and over again back in my life. I hear it. It's like, oh, this person did this and that and this to me and this, and I can't take it no more. And then they like, that's it, I'm done. Right? And then they let it go. And then they're like, oh no, I let it back in again. But it's going to be different this time. And they let that energy right back in, and the energy doesn't change over time because it's very hard to change. It's not easy to change. And if we're looking for people to change, that's not the point. You either accept someone the way they are or you're not going to wait on someone to, I mean, you can wait on someone to change. You're just wasting time on waiting. Okay, I'm just going to put that out there. And I don't mean like you're wasting time like they're not enough. You're wasting your precious time, right? Where you could be giving it to people that are supporting your environment rather than toxifying your environment. And it's kind of looking at that, like, what pools do I want to swim in? And sometimes we're like, okay, we're going to play in the toxic pool with toxic people, but we're going to be aware of it. We're going to set boundaries, and maybe we can only stand it for a couple of minutes. You can't swim in a pool forever, right? With all that chlorine and stuff. It would totally tear you up. And in fact, we have swim instructors where I work, at the gym that I work at, who literally say their skin smells of chlorine. You can only swim in, that bleach stuff for too long. But they still jump in sometimes. Right? It's just understanding the boundaries that you're going to set, and understanding that you are the invitation for the toxic environment. That helps you to have control with it rather than it controlling you. In other words, it re-empowers you. The other way around, there's disempowerment in that way of thinking, right? The disempowerment of saying, oh, well, it just happens to me. Well, okay, yeah. But there's also your ability to step away from it. So you'll see it. People love drama. They love it. Like, Let's just be real. People love to live in drama, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with it. But at the point that it starts to make you sick, or at the point that you're in an unhealthy relationship and it starts to compromise your own personal well-being, mentally, physically, emotionally, then it's the opportunity to then look at it and say, wow, what am I doing? And just question yourself. Literally question yourself. I question myself all the time. Why? Because literally I will make probably some of the stupidest mistakes if I don't. Like, I've done that before. Like, Natalie, how did you end up in this situation? To this day, there are people, oh, well, you're this spiritual practitioner and you're this and you're that. Yeah, but I'm human. I'm not perfect. And I still make weird choices sometimes. Like choices that I'm going, what the heck was that all about? God bless you too, Rick. So ask yourself, right? Today, I ask you on this Monday in Step In Powerfully, am I the one who's inviting? Am I the invitation to the toxic environment? If I am, why am I stepping in that space? Why am I allowing myself to be the open vessel of toxicity to exist in my life? And if it's like, okay, I am the open vessel to allow toxic energy into my space, how do I begin to set the boundaries? It'll never go away. But how do I begin? Good morning, Julie. Good morning, Mala. I don't know if it's Mala or Mala. Because when we say Mala, it's a bad girl. That I know it's not Mala, but Mala. How do I begin to set up the boundaries? So that I'm not just the open vessel for all this toxic energy that, yeah, it's going to seep in. We can't deny deterioration, even of the body. We can't say, oh, my body's never going to be exposed to toxins. That's not true. We live in an environment that's toxic, and naturally that's going to happen, right? That happens. That's part of, like, the world around us. Things will disintegrate and change, even in our minds and spirits and all that. Things are going to come in. We're always going to, be experiencing suffering in this three-dimensional time space, at least as we know it. I mean, I've never even heard of a perfect time. There's always been war and this and that and people fighting, and Job killed his brother, and I think it was Job. And if I'm wrong, correct me if I'm wrong. But people have always been murdered, but the toxicity has always existed. So there's boundaries we can set for ourselves. Like, oh yeah, that's not a toxic environment I'm going to be a part of. Or if I'm going to, I'll just be there for like a little bit and then I'm going to bail out because I don't want to stay there for too long. It's understanding, at least accepting it exists so that you can then learn how to maneuver through it and how you can set up boundaries and how you can say, okay, I'm not going there, but not avoiding it. Okay, that's not the point, especially in spiritual alchemy. It's not to avoid it. It's to recognize it as it arises and set the healthy boundaries that don't allow you to get sick. You're setting up the boundaries so that for your own personal well-being. Or don't. Totally up to you, of course. But when you set those boundaries and you allow yourself to say, okay, I'm going to let this, maybe the toxic will drip just a little bit less because I'm setting up a boundary with this particular person. And I'm not going to be the open invitation for that energy to come in. Right? It's like you can be there open and vulnerable and then let the toxic take you. But guess what? It might disintegrate you all to pieces. That's why we have boundaries. That's why we have these tools in our toolkit so that we can then say, oh yeah, here's what's good, but here, this is too much for me. I just need but then it's like, well, I sort of need the drama a little bit, kind of, maybe for some entertainment in my life. But I think I'll just listen to the drama of somebody else and not really get involved in it. But I'm going to listen to it and I'm going to be like, oh, yeah, okay, well, I love you anyway, and I love you, and I love you both. And even though you guys have a drama, know that it's all going to be okay. And just give it a big hug and be like, okay, well, I listened to the drama. That doesn't mean I have to be a part of it. But the toxic is still there, right? The toxicity is still there. And I'm going to clean my energy off and I'm going to go for a run and let it go and pray for them. You know, there's ways that you can engage it without having to take it on and be the open vessel and allow yourself to be in toxic relationships. And remember, sometimes our threshold is a little bit higher because we've been trained to be in toxic relationships sometimes. And so we don't even realize it until we're in really good relationships. And then we're like, wow, what was I doing? What was I thinking? And then sometimes we let go of the toxic and we bring it right back in. And we open up arms. Yes, come back. Come right back. Come running back, in fact. And just whoosh, like a wave of toxicity in me. You know? So, there you have it. It's up to you again. No right, wrong, good, or bad. But I do invite you to at least be cognizant and open to this, because right now we are going through sort of a shadow era. a lot of shadow energies are dancing with us. Not right, wrong, good, or bad, but it's a spiritual, I want to say it's a spiritual warfare out there. We're in a time of a spiritual warfare it's mental, it's emotional, it's not a tangible warfare at this time. And to help ourselves through this, right? To help ourselves, hey Gadon, hi, how are you? To help ourselves through this, the battles that may be arising, right? Because the battles are coming up, right? We're here and it's like, oh, we're at war. Well, we're at war with what? We're at war with our mindset. We're at war with a paradigm shift. We are fighting for the old paradigm and not surrendering to the new paradigm, and it's causing this confliction in the brain. So it's a spiritual warfare right now. That's what it is. People want things to stay the same, and they're not. They're not going to be the same. They never can be. They'll never go back to the same. They're shifting and changing. And so it's asking yourself, what tools do I have in my spiritual life, in my mental capacity to slay what is happening or what is coming up? Understanding the boundaries, recognizing what we're allowing in our space. Who am I engaging with? What are the conversations that I'm having? Who is in my space? Have I allowed this toxicity to rule my life? What is my threshold for this energy to be in my space? Am I just totally numb to it? Sometimes we are in so much pain, and I'm talking, we numb out and then we just numb and we're just immobilized. How do I start to move in a direction or put some action behind it so that I'm not numb, so that then I can feel it a little bit? And that way I can start to understand where the toxicity is showing up, why it's showing up, and how to set up a boundary so that I don't have to be so exposed, basically. Not that you're not going to be exposed, because you will, because that's part of life. But then you gain control back of your spiritual and mental well-being, and you can slay it. You can see it. And when a lesson shows up, you have the ability and the skills, and you're like, I see that toxic thing is trying to come towards me again. And now, because you have discernment, you can say, yeah, I don't choose that in my life. I don't choose that toxic energy in my life. Doesn't mean I don't love it. Doesn't mean that I may not engage it at some point, but I'm not going to be an open vessel with open arms running to it and say, yes, just come. Some people might. Nothing right, wrong, good, or bad. Just know what you're up to when you do that. Know that what you're accepting is the same circumstances and conditions. It allows you to be personally responsible for the experiences you're having. When we can be personally responsible for the experiences that we're having, we reclaim our spiritual well-being, we reclaim our life, we reclaim our mental capacity, our emotional. We start to bring it back in and hone it in. And we say, hey, you can't take my thoughts from me. You can't take the way that I see the situation. You can't take away that I set up boundaries to protect my well-being. Anything beyond that is a force, and if it comes and takes it away from you, that's different. But you have a choice, and understanding that is where the power lies. Understanding that we have choice. Hey, Lingalunga, how are you? Oh, and also just loved your set. I loved your music. It was beautiful. That was really fun. And Poetic showed up, and I don't know if you and Poetic met through here, but if you did, I think that is so amazing. I have people who have become friends through these platforms of mine, and they've connected, and still stay connected. And that's the beauty of this, right? It's the connection to the people, like people making friends. That is so cool. And she loves your music. So that makes me happy that you guys were able to connect that way. I have people on my Facebook Live. One was from Egypt and the other one was from the UK. And they still talk. They still connect. So it's like making friends across the globe with perhaps the same sort of mindset and able to communicate with each other. That's beautiful. It's like a spiritual family connection. Like we can get each other, you know what I mean? And that's just to me, that's the coolest thing ever. Yep, and a deeper understand. Yes. And it just touches my heart in so many ways. So I'm really glad that you guys were able to connect and that you guys are homies or whatever you guys are. It just, because we have to listen to each other. Amen. And I loved listening to your music. It just was amazing. I was just cleaning and listening. And Lingalonga, you guys can follow Lingalonga. He does, he won't, I don't think you just broadcast live, but I don't think he publishes his work, is my understanding. But he does live. That's on the Podbean for those of you on Facebook Live. So just amazing. So again, remember, you can be the open invitation for that toxicity, or you can allow yourself to set up boundaries. I highly encourage that you just don't go running. If you've exited a toxic environment and situation and a circumstance, that you keep your boundaries. The change doesn't come, I'll just say this last thing. The change doesn't come in hopes that the toxic energy in your life is going to change. The change comes from you being either the invitation or setting the boundary when it tries to come back. In other words, we can't stop, we can't change people. That's not even the game here. The game is, how do I support myself? There's things you can't even probably change in yourself. I've tried over and over, and it's like, this doesn't change. The outcome ends up the same. What am I doing? How do I have these patterns? I've done it, and I've applied theory, and I've applied concept, and I've been in the being, right, of it. So I've said, let me experience and let me shift the experience. The only thing I'm shifting is my experience. There's certain patterns that don't change. Toxic people in your life don't just say, oh, I'm not going to be, they don't even know. And perhaps they're not toxic for other people. It's just your energies don't. And then you think it's going to change and they're going to change, and they're not going to change. They are who they are. The only thing that can shift is the ability for you to allow yourself to set up the boundary. Am I going to re-accept this or not? that is a self-worth conversation. Am I worthy? Am I not worthy? Am I okay with allowing this to go on? Am I okay with opening myself up right wide open to the toxic energy coming right back at me? Or do I get to shift and change? Which is, again, you can shift and change your ability to allow it to come in or not. That doesn't mean the circumstances are different with individuals. It just means that you're allowing yourself to recognize and be aware of the patterns that are showing up in your life. And you either learn the lesson or you don't. And they'll keep showing up again and again and again and again. Got to stop being a victim. I have to make effort to that. Yeah. Never publish because I like the direct energy. Yeah. Lingalonga. It's, and again, it's like, it all sounds pretty in words, right? Like me saying it. But in practice, it's not easy. And I get that. And it's okay. We're all working. I'm working on it. I work on it every day. I practice what I preach. I know it's very difficult and it's not easy, and every day's a new lesson, and it's always this new maybe struggle or this new recognition, and sometimes the energies that want to resurface or come back in our life look different. They're like wear a different face, or they enter in a different way, but at the end of the day it's the same thing. And then it's like, oh, it's the same lesson, and it's like you either have discernment to see it faster or you don't. And then it keeps showing up and showing up and showing up and showing up and showing up. And then finally you're like, oh, shoot, I'm the one who's invited this into my life. I'm inviting it. It's like a vampire, right? If you thought about the idea, the ideology around vampires, right? They can't, part of it is the vampire can't come in unless you allow it. That's like saying, I give you permission to feed off my energy. It can't do it unless you allow it to come in and you invite it in. It's the same thing with the toxic people or toxic environments. You're the invitation for it. You're the one who's saying, I invite you in. You see the vampire, you're like, oh yeah, come on in. Suck all my blood out. Suck it all out till I'm dry and have nothing left. That's true. Different forms of the same toxic behaviors do show themselves if you don't deal with it. Yeah. And so again, we look at the vampire, and then that's another way you can say it. Like, write a list of people where you're like, okay, they take energy or give energy. How do you feel after that engagement with the person? Do you feel drained? Or do you feel alive? If you feel drained, they might be an energy vampire. Now, are they doing it purposely? No. For somebody else, they may fill their cup. Right? Because different energies engaged in different ways. I might suck the life out of somebody. Who knows? Not realizing it and saying, oh, I'm probably not good. But when if I realize it, and I've realized that some people get drained. I'm like, oh, you need to just, I will set the boundary myself. Like, I get that I'm a lot for you, so the engagement needs to be a little less, or I need to meet them where they're at. And that's me being cognizant and being proactive. But not everybody gets that. Not everybody's aware of that. Some people just suck the life out of everybody and don't even realize it. They'll just drink and drink and drink and drink and drink. And it doesn't matter. You can tell them, and they'll suck. And then every environment that they go out, they become seco, right? The other people, which is dried out, right? They just take all the juices away. So it is a lot, and it's a lot to think about. But if you wrote a list, and that's what I wanted to say, is like, write a list of people. How do I feel after the engagement with them? Do I feel full of life, or do I feel really tired and drained? And then just go through it, and then ask yourself, am I being the open invitation for this energy to suck my life? Doesn't mean you get rid of them. There's some people that you may not get rid of. You're like, no, but I love them. Okay, and maybe they're sucking my energy bone dry, but that doesn't mean I have to get rid of them. It just means that my engagement with them is going to be minimized, or the way that I engage them is going to be different. And if it doesn't change, then you have the ability to cut it off too. So it's really up to you. But this is looking at what vampires do I have in my life, and am I the one who's inviting them in? Of course you are. Who else could be inviting them in? Nobody else. I invited this vampire into my life. That's why this is happening. Now, here's the deal. I love them, but I'm going to put up a boundary with them. And then you can set boundaries. Not, you could cut them off. And I'll tell you, there are people that I just cut out of my life because I'm like, no. I forgive you. I love you. And I'm always going to pray for you. And that's me. I'm always gonna, but that doesn't mean that I'm just like open arms. Come back to me, toxic. What? No, my personal well-being and the love that I have for myself is more powerful. Okay, so gotta sleep. Thanks. Yes, Linga. Sleep well. I look forward to listening and catching you live if I can get there. I got your email and I was at a friend's birthday party, so I couldn't listen, but I love listening to your stuff, so I appreciate you. Cool. All good. So there you have it. Like you said, taking personal responsibility of your life, looking at what's in your environment. Remember that this is a spiritual battle that we're in. It's not, your weapons are your internal weapons that you have, which is your voice, your ability to know that you can speak up and that you can you have the power within you to decide what you want in your space, basically. So personal responsibility, okay? So there you have it. Hey Mel, how are you? I was just getting off right now. But make that list. Okay? That's kind of like, I guess, your homework is what I'd say. Make the list and ask yourself, on the list, and then really look at it and be authentic with yourself. You could do this alone. You don't have to do it with other people around, right? And just be real with yourself and ask yourself, wow, is this taking or giving? And am I the one who, and the bigger question is, am I the one who's the open invitation for this energy to be in my space? That way you can take personal responsibility, and that gives you the power to actually say, okay, I get to move this way or that way. Or I'm accepting the toxicity and then being like, but I want to. Some people will. My niece will be like, I know this is my feeling, and that's how I feel. And I said, is it serving you? Is it, well, yeah. I said, okay. Well, then I just walk away, because deep inside, people know if it really is serving them. They're just sometimes afraid to be really authentic because they want it to look differently. Like, we do that in our head. We play these tricks, right? We're like, we want it to look different. It's not different. It is what it is. This is where reality has to set in and say, yeah, but what I'm seeing, and this is the facts, and this is really what I'm experiencing, and not putting some false idea of what I want to see and it's not matching up. We can live in that fairy tale world, but it's being honest with yourself, right? This is really getting real. So be on the real. Be on the real with yourself. Or don't. Totally up to you. So there you have it. And I love you guys, and I will be seeing you guys tomorrow. So have a magical, mystical, magnificent, magnetic, marvelous Monday. Yes, peace to you as well, Mel. And I will be seeing you guys tomorrow, okay? Have the best day ever. Bye-bye.